I mean, you know what the core question is here, and I haven't asked it all day, but do you ever, and this goes to both of you actually, because this would be anyone on the team.
It sounds hard. You should start.
Obviously, as a founder, do you ever sit up at night and wonder if you're playing God here?
Like we just have to go build a business that can make $50 million.
You've done it before,
and then we can just give it to conservation.
Yeah. How many companies have you like spun off?
From Colossal?
No. Yourself before this.
This is my sixth company that I've founded and ran.
Yeah, you've done this. You're not missing any meals. Like this is you've been around this block. Yeah, so, I understand why you think that way.
But so I was like, could we raise? You know, we could just make, all we have to do is make $50 million. You're telling me if we make $50 million in profit and I give it to you, you can help fix elephant conservation? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, all right. That doesn't seem that hard to me.
But Beth, who, to your point, wrote a book literally saying at the end, like, you can't, she ends up coming around. So what does that?
So the other thing is, let me give you two other examples and we'll loop them all together. Our head of bioethics, Alta Charo, she's amazing. She's literally the best. Best. They're all the best. But she's awesome. And she debated.
She's a New Yorker.
Yeah, she debated. She debated George Church and was like, we should never bring back mammoths. And when I talked to her the first time, she's like, have you thought about making a tomato? And I was like, well, this is gonna be an uphill battle. but it's like, but you want the people that have. So the way I think about it is, you want the people that have thought about all the bad shit, right? You don't want the people that just say, fuck yeah, we should go do this. This is amazing.
Yes.
We can get a lot of those. We got a lot of people that love this business, right? But we want the people that are at the top of their field that have challenged this for years, because that means they've thought about it for years. The person that just gets some random interview that's at like Western Cincinnati State that's like never done anything in their life, that person isn't the top of their field. So let's go find the top of their field that are also not pro this. And so another person that was not very nice to us when we launched was a guy named Luva Dahlin. He's the #1 mammoth researcher in the world. #1. He's at the University of Stockholm.
How do you rank like mammoth?
There's an official world ranking.
Yeah. And he's at the top of the leaderboard.
It's like it's good for marketing.
No, he is. Like, I mean,
but he's highly published, highly respected.
We're gonna get a GitHub for mammoth people.
That's a good idea.
No, it's a great idea actually. But he's done more mammoth research, more mammoth publications. He's driven the research in understanding the evolutionary tract and all the genetics of mammoths more than anyone in the world. And when we launched, he was pretty negative, and we called him, and I think he was a little confused when we called him. He's like, well, I just talked shit about you in the press. Why are you calling me? And it's like, well, you're the #1 guy in the world. And so now 59 of our like 65-ish mammoth genomes come from Luva.
How did you turn him? How did you take him from that first call?
I don't think it's that hard.
It's not that hard. And people ask that. It's like, people say, oh, you sold them, you persuade them. It's like,
people think it's money all the time, and half these guys don't get a dime out of this. But what it is I think everybody has the same superficial reaction, right? They all go, well, have you thought about these 5 bad ideas? And you go, yeah, we thought about this, and they go, okay, well, and then they start to stretch. What about these 3 things? And then you go, yeah, here's how we're addressing it. And then suddenly they go, I'm comfortable with this. What about, have you thought about trying this and doing this? And suddenly the excitement comes out.
So with Alta, I actually said, she gave me some feedback about like ethical frameworks and all this other stuff. And so I came back and I wrote some, and I just sent her an email. I was like, are these good? Are these a bad idea? And she was like, I think the fact that we are not just open to criticism, but listening to the experts, right? There's a lot, you know this, there's a lot of difference between the ex-couch experts that know everything, right, in the world about every topic, right? We've got those people. Those people are just annoying, right? But people that are like the top of their field, head of leaderboards, that are negative, you should at least hear them the fuck out. Yeah. And so and I think the fact that we don't just listen to them, but then we try to implement what they say. So Alta and I started this conversation where we were going back and forth, and she was like helping us think through regulatory and ethical. And by the way, at the time, super anti-colossal. And but I think the fact that we were listening to her, and that we did the same thing with George, the same thing with Beth. And with Beth, I said, join our advisory board. Like, we're doing this. Maybe it'd be good for you to have some oversight so you can tell us what we're doing wrong or shit all over it, right? And then that led to us then saying, we got some ancient DNA. I was like, we don't have the best lab to do it. Can we? She's got one of the top, at the time, one of the largest ancient DNA labs in the world at UC Santa Cruz. And we said, can we use your lab to do this? And she processed it. And I was like, and we got better results with her lab than this other lab we were using. And then we were like, how do we get better results? Why do we ask a lot of questions? And I think that level of vulnerability and transparency with the world leaders in these various fields has brought them in, and then our relationships with them evolved. So,
what do you think? So, going from the last chapter though, where she says you can't, and now where she is now.
So I was sitting with her, and I was like, I agree with you. You can't bring back a mammoth. You cannot. They're not living cells. They're not clonable cells. But I was like, don't you think you can engineer one? And when you ask these, like the thing about science is if you say,
that seems like semantics.
Well, that's all fucking science is. And so, like, I can give you 1,000 examples of semantic arguments in science, and the reason we don't live on the moon, and the reason we don't have like trips to and cold fusion and shit is because of semantics in science. So, I truly fundamentally believe that. But I asked her that, and I said, but do you think that we can understand enough about the genome, do comparative genomics, and edit and engineer one? And her response was, yeah, I think the technologies are here today to do that. And so that's the thing that's interesting to me is I think that all of science, sometimes this is not a popular statement, but I think all of science, we are moving to a world when you look at access to compute, AI, synthetic biology, and all of these tools where we're going to move from scientific experiments to engineering. And so that is the world that we live in. We now have the tools. So it's about knowledge and understanding, access to compute and AI, and then having the tools to engineer. So we're moving to a scientific engineering world, less of a scientific experiment world. Like we'll be able to run full simulations where you don't even have to do wetware experiments.
What does that look like?
It would be amazing. So you could figure out like what are the potential off-target effects or unintended consequences, like you asked about in the genome, that you could do that all in a simulation because we'll know enough about gene-to-gene interactions and the various sub-pathways. That's incredible. So
are you leveraging AI to do that?
So our company would not be possible without AI.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy because also like AI was something that in 2015, 2016, 2017, a lot of the smart people in the world were really talking about, and I got really into it because I'm like learning about this, like holy shit, it's this crazy frontier. And then there was like this, at least publicly, not you guys obviously, not the people working on it, but there was like this pause button for like 5 years, and no one really talked about it. And then one day they're like, ChatGPT.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
LLM
now it's just
yeah.
everywhere. I mean, Joe's in the studio today. We were going through like he's a scriptwriter, so he was going through like how he was able to develop like a whole cartoon concept based on his script with what was that ChatGPT 4?
Yeah, and Sora.
That's fucking insane.
Sora stuff's amazing.
It's insane, like how far it's come in the last couple of years. So you guys, but it's almost like you guys got to be looking at your watch, going like, "Where you been, everybody? Like we've been on this shit."
Yeah.
But I feel the same way about De-Extinction, right? 10 years ago, we were talking about how, you watch Terminator, like Skynet is AI. We can't unleash AI on the world. And now people are going, well, you watch Jurassic Park. We can't unleash De-Extinction on the world.
No, my favorite on the Jurassic Park people is people, we literally get the question like, didn't you see what happened in Jurassic Park? And there's almost this like assumption that it was real for a minute. And I love that. It's like,
that was
art imitates life, though.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it predicts
I think
some
what's
stuff.
great about Jurassic Park is it asks some really challenging moral questions, right?
Yes.
And that's great. And for people like Ben and I, when we get asked that all the time, it's the whole Jeff Goldblum, your scientists were so busy wondering if they could, they forgot to ask if they should, right?
I should make a preoccupied shirt.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah, you should.
That would sell.
Yeah. We don't sell anything.
I know, but
I'll
saying
send it to you.
You're going to start selling stuff.
Yeah.
No, I think that the technology, spinning out the technologies plus the long-term carbon credits, I think that we'll have a multi-billion-dollar ARR business, which I think's pretty interesting.
Fuck the merch.
Yeah. We'll just make it more exclusive,
It's just
right?
loose change in the couch at that point.
I do like a lot. Like I didn't have to ask you this, and you were just running through it with several examples. I do like that you've gone out of your way over the years of working on this to reach out to people in, say, the evolutionary biology field who are not amenable, at least at first, to what you're doing, because that was going to be a question. It's like, would you want to talk to some of the critics and the people who are not just like excited about, fucking dire wolves and seeing you on Joe Rogan and seeing you on the Today Show and all the hoopla around it? who may have concerns about this distracting from the things they've worked on. I mean, I mentioned Paul Rosolie, obviously he feels that way. Actually, Alessi, can we pull up, he did an Instagram post on this. Do you have that? Can we pull this up? Because this would be good. Address this head on.
No, I love it. And I mean, look, I'm on the board of trustees of the Explorers Club, and there's a lot of conservationists. We have ECAD on the Explorers Club annual dinner on Saturday. I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of feedback from a lot of people. Yeah. But that's okay. That it creates.
But you take it. I like that.
But I think with the whole distraction narrative that happens. Colossal is a media circus, right? Colossal brings a lot of attention, brings a lot of excitement. But the idea that it's a distraction is a false narrative because that's assuming we live in a net zero world where there's only so much attention that can be put on conservation. But what we know is that there hasn't been enough attention. So we're bringing more attention. Right. So that we can still pay attention, and Colossal does a great job of highlighting conventional conservation. De-extinction does not work without habitat. So we have to work with people that protect habitats, that restore habitats. We can't bring back a northern white rhino without having a place in Uganda for that northern white rhino, right?
And what was just to have this out there, we talked about this at the beginning, but I want to redrive this home so you can get this out there right. The logic of working on things that have long been extinct versus the things that are in danger right now, which you're still working on. Yeah. But it's like of saying, we're going to bring back the dodo. We're going to bring back the mammoth. We're going to bring back the direwolf. It's strictly to be able to test on your test tubes to be able to relate it to current species.
I think it's three things, right? I think one, it's a harder systems model, right? So if we work in DNA that's not ancient DNA, we are solving harder problems, and it's vastly more applicable to more recent species. If you solve an end-to-end, the de-extinction process is a systems model, so you have to solve the entire innovation around everything from ancient DNA and assembling one. Well, we have those same problems with extant species and with our DNA, right? So you're solving harder problems. That implies that you're making better technologies. So that's number one. The second thing is, we're working on species. The vast majority of that, we actually are doing more conservation work than we even are doing de-extinction work. But the de-extinction work that we're doing, we're working on species that, for the most part, will have an ecological benefit to their return, a cultural benefit, a spiritual impact in some cases. And then the third is, to Matt's point, on the attention side, you'll get people excited about these technologies, right? And so there's all these different, debates on everything that or not everything, but a lot of things that we do. But when you do it in that side of things, not only are you bringing the attention, but you're building technologies that are harder.
Right.
You just simply are, right? And, it's not our job to persuade the world about it. It's our job just to educate people what we're doing and create the conversation, right? And we don't even care if it creates the conversation; it just seems to do it, right?
Yeah.
Which we find moderately interesting.
Which is good to have it in the public forum too, where you can have. I like that. Like this can be talked about publicly, and it's not just like behind closed doors, people bitching at each other.
The other thing though is it depends on how people want to go deep, right? If people want to go listen to a multi-hour Joe Rogan podcast or your podcast or get really, really deep, so like Time, when we launched the direwolves with Time and with New York and a few others, they went really deep. They spent hundreds of hours to understand the science, to understand where phylogenetically, we've had what's interesting is like no one talked about the fact that we brought up Pleistocene wolf back. Everyone just wants to argue what to call it and classify it, right? And so, people call me and they're like, "Are you upset about that?" And I was like, no, people have a right to do whatever they want, right? And so my view, though, which I think is important, is that, at least to me, is that regardless of what some of the quote unquote controversy is on this, we are advancing the tools and advancing the conservation, and at least our conservation agenda, pretty quickly. And we actually had a lot of feedback after I don't know if you saw the woolly mouse. I don't want to get away from what you want to talk about.
No, please, take your time.
But the woolly mouse, I don't know if you saw that project that we worked on.
No.
Can we also pull up a picture of the woolly mouse? Because it is you could hate Colossal.
Yeah, and but not a real species, right?
Yeah.
This is
you could hate Colossal, but these are objectively fucking cute. You can't not say that, right? So
it's a little puffball.
Yeah, and so
it's like a Cheeto.
And so what we did to do this, and then I think this leads well into
that one on the right kind of shows an unedited mouse versus what we did.
Yeah, and so
they're little.
Yeah, they're mice, right? We didn't make one misconception is people think these are the size of mammoths. They are.
That's false advertising.
They are not.
Not yet.
And so,
right.
yeah,
Don't do that.
What are you doing? Yeah.
Don't do that.
And so what I'll tell you though is like, we actually took. So in a just talk a little bit about the science, and then it'll lead, I think, really well into the direwolf. Is that what's interesting was we've identified, and we're in the editing phase of the Mammoth project. That means that there's about 85 genes that we have to edit. We're not trying to clone a mammoth. We've been very, very clear about that. We're not trying to clone direwolves. We're not trying to clone these animals. We're trying to make the exact replication of that. Right? That's kind of silly. We think that kind of like coding. If you can write, and if you talk to anyone in that's written any code, they say, "Oh, I can write 3,000 lines of code." And it does X. And then someone else says, I can do the same thing in 5 lines of code. Everyone objectively in software will say, do it the second way, because there's less things that you can fuck up. There's less things that you can break, right? So the better we do computational analysis and the smarter we are on the comparative genomics and identifying the core genes, the less edits we have to make. We're not trying to make, like I could have made 1,000, we have the technology Colossal, we could have made 1,000 plus edits in the direwolf, which would have blown people's mind from a genome engineering show of force perspective.
Super animal.
But it doesn't make a super animal. It's not more direwolf. If you have 1,000
it's something
edits.
different.
It just doesn't make more, right? If you look at it from truly a mathematical perspective, it doesn't have a true mathematical reasoning. And so with the woolly mice, for example, we made 8 edits. Right? Even some people say only 8 edits. Most people were doing it 1 edit at a time. I mean, they'd edit a mouse. They'd then edit the next generation with 1 edit. They'd edit the next generation. And they go through 8 generations of mice to what's called stack those edits. Using our technologies and using multiplex editing, we delivered all of those edits 1 time. So 1 generation of mice. From a health perspective, we also do monoclonal screening, and then we do genome sequencing, full genome sequencing on all the embryos.
How long did this take?
1 month.
That's it.
Well, because we had built the system, right? So that's the thing is like we started the woolly mouse project in September and October of last year. We had woolly mice.
Wow.
And so, but what we did is we took, and so what we did, which I think sometimes is lost on people, is not only is the multiplex editing and the fact that we had nothing but healthy mice born with exactly the physical attributes or phenotypes we wanted, was we don't want to just go test in elephants, right? Because it's non-ethical. 22-month gestation. So you have 3 ways to test to see if your mammoth edits are working. 1, you can test them in silica and test them do functional tests in cells, which we're doing. 2, you can grow what's called organoids. It's because it's a little science fiction. Organoids. Which this is a little. It's cool. It's a little science fiction weird. Where we actually have hair follicles that are growing mammoth hair. So they're live, but they're not a full system of an animal, right?
It's like a plant.
I mean, it's a very
like an air plant.
Yeah, a very, very, very small plant, right?
Real quick, Ben, can I just go pee? Real
Sure.
fast? All right. Yeah. We'll be right back. Sorry about that. This is actually the earliest podcast we've ever recorded because my bladder in the morning is so bad. So apologies to everyone out there. But Ben, you were talking about growing like just a hair.
Yeah. So to test whether we got these whether the genotype to phenotype, the editing is working, the second way is growing organoids. So we're growing organoids and we're testing it, but that's still not a full animal. And so we came up with many people use what's called a mouse model because mice are very well studied in laboratories. And so what we did was we identified all of the genes that we're working with mammoth. There's about 200 million years of genetic divergence between elephants and mice. So we're not just going to take a random gene from a mammoth and ram it into a fucking mouse and like hope it works, right? But that's also like an animal welfare and ethics thing, right? And we're certified by American Humane Society, the oldest humane organization in the world. And so we have to do what we want to do, but we also have standards of how we do all this stuff. And so what we did is then we used AI and compute to understand what are the mouse equivalent of these mammoth genes, so to see if we're on the right track. So we took those genes, we delivered them all in 1 edit, and one what's called multiplex edited array. It then made, we got 100% of the edits in, which is nearly unheard of in multiplex editing. Typically these things have like 15 to 20% efficiency, where we have 100% are right under 100% in most cases. And what's crazy about that is then, 22 days later, our mice were born, and then they grow, and we got exactly the phenotypes, right? So what's great is we could test this in 20 days versus in 22 months in elephants with little risk. And these guys like blew people's minds and went crazy. I didn't realize they'd be the internet sensation.
I was shocked when Ben said, hey, we're going to go public with the woolly mouse. I thought, well, that's just ridiculous, especially we were coming out with direwolf soon. But then when we broke the internet with a mouse, I was like, holy shit.
People
what's going to happen with these wolves?
Yeah, but I will say when we came out with direwolf, some people that are, there's about 20 scientists that are consistently not our biggest fans, which is fine. Like we're not we don't care what if they like us or not. I think it's our job just to keep doing what we're doing. But one of the feedbacks they got is they've lied to the world because they had this mouse and we were mad at them, or they were they literally, there's quotes from a handful of these folks about how they were excited. They're like, ha ha ha, they're only working in mice. They'll never make it to what's called the non-model species, like a wolf. And they were like, the entire time they were taking this negative feedback from us when they had these secret dire wolves. So then people were, this small community was somewhat frustrated because they felt like they were laughing at the fact that we were here, even though, by the way, the woolly mice are a genetic, like they're a huge achievement for genetic engineering. They're an insane achievement for genetic engineering. And they thought, oh, if they're here, that means that they won't be anywhere else for 10 years. And then we delivered 20 edits in a non-model species being a wolf, right? And so, which I'm sure we'll get into. But the woolly mice was something that, we were really excited about because it just shows kind of the application of the intended targets on genes, what the intended outcomes would be, and more importantly, all the mice were healthy.
Yeah, you had said before we paused for a second back there, you had said a line where you were going, we're not, to be clear, we're not cloning these species, we are
engineering
them, right? So that seems to be some of the criticism with respect to the dire wolf, where people are saying, okay, you took a gray wolf.
Yeah, which is 99.5% a dire wolf.
Right. So you took something very close, and they'd leave out that context, to be fair to you.
Yeah.
And you edited, I forget what the number was, 8 or 14 genes.
14 genes, 20 edits, yeah.
Okay. And so it's really just like a gray wolf with some edits. We can't know for sure that it's actually a dire wolf. Like, how do you respond to that?
So I'm sure we'll both have different responses to that. I think
we got different responses. I like this.
Well, I think we'll be additive to it because I think we look at it from a different perspective. There's about 31 ways to classify a species. Just so you know this. So there's not one way, right? Like we were taught in school, I assume we're both taught the same thing, which was the biological ways. Like if things can't breed with something else, it's a species. That is what I think generally they get taught in the textbooks. But a polar bear and a brown bear, I don't know if you know this, those are different species. And I think if you look at a polar bear and then you look at a brown bear, you're like, okay, one's aquatic and white and cold adapted and one isn't, you would be like, it makes sense those are different species. They mate all the time and have viable offspring. So by the biological definition of speciation, they should be the same species. But I think you could look at them and say, well, that's dumb, right? And so once again, I'm not a biologist. I'm not a conservationist. I just am just a person that likes to ask weird questions with smarter people than me. And so I was like, well, that's weird. And then there's what's called the morphological definition, right? Where it's like, if something looks like something and has specific, so this is where polar bears and bears trade. And ironically, so do wolves and dogs fall in this category. And I hate to break people, dire wolves were wolves. And so what's interesting about that is that, there's a morphological concept, which is that if it has specific traits to serve specific ecological functions that aren't found in other things, then it's its own species. That's classification. And what we know about dire wolves is that they were before Colossal, here's what we knew about dire wolves. They were 20 to 25% bigger. They had a little bit stronger, they think they had a stronger jaw, but had a little bit larger craniofacial structure and jaw. And then they had, and then based on the bone density, they think they were heavier, stronger, more muscle. That is what is known definitively about dire wolves before Colossal. They didn't even know where the lineage was. They didn't even know where in the canid family they fell.
Before Colossal.
There was a paper that came out, which ironically, Beth Shapiro and half the people on our direwolf paper are on paper were on the original paper around direwolves because direwolves were popular because of Game of Thrones. Scientists, believe it or not, really do like the limelight. I found over the years. I thought that working with engineers in Silicon Valley was challenging, but I learn and adapt, right? We all do. And so, but what's interesting is that the conclusion about 5 years ago from this paper before Colossal existed was we don't know. That was the conclusion. But believe it or not, the media read that as said because the paper mentions the paper mentions jackals. So then it ran with the headlines were Game of Thrones direwolves were jackals, not wolves. So that was so that got into the zeitgeist, right? So then everyone just read the headlines. Nobody read the scientific paper. No one looked at the phylogenetic charts. So there was just this belief that they were jackals. Which was actually an incorrect media interpretation.
They don't do that.
No. They're spot on. And so really smart people think they were jackals. But even if you go ask anybody on that paper, even if they hate Colossal, if you go ask people on that original paper, they say that was not the result. Our results was we don't know, and that's because they had about 0.15x of the genome, and so they didn't have a full complete genome. We got 13x, meaning that we had, we talked about the genetic code earlier.
Yes.
And that means that we got a full read of both of our genomes, because we have two genomes. One is 13,000-year-old tooth and a 72,000-year-old skull. So 60,000 years of genetic divergence between our two genomes, right? And so we got 13 reads of it. So we actually were able to identify the core genes that are what's called conserved. So we talked about genetic diversity in the genome earlier. So the things that really made a direwolf, and what we know from a phenological perspective, right? Like we know about craniofacial, we know about size, and we know about coat. Well, one thing that we discovered that nobody knew, because there's no hair of direwolf to be known to exist, is that they were white. And what's funny is there were all these different, because there was a season where people thought they were related to jackals, that there are paleo artists that designed them, painted pictures of them where they were, pre-generative AI, where they were red. So people were like, no, but direwolves were jackals and they were red. Well, that's just incorrect. That at the time, it was actually incorrect because the paper came out with it's inconclusive, right? We now know definitively that they were closer to wolves than jackals through our deep genome sequencing. And we also identified that their coat was white, which is amazing. And what people don't also realize, you mentioned the gray wolf stuff, which I know we'll get into, is that there's 60,000 years of genetic divergence between our two direwolf samples. If you
60,000 years.
60,000 years. But what people don't think about is that there's less than 60,000 years between our wolves of today and our 12,000-year-old tooth, right? So we actually understand. I think Colossal has about 500 times more data on this than anyone else in the world, which we're now starting to publish so that people can kind of go through it. And so if you, people say, well, you're not making a mammoth, you're just making a genetically different and genetically edited Asian elephant. It's but that's what mammoths were. They're just different, they were just genetically engineered by nature and in a very slow and efficient way. We have been doing, you talked about GMOs. We've been doing crossbreeding and genetic engineering for a long time as a society. Look at a fucking pug. But we've been doing that, like no wolf thought one day it was going to be a fucking pug, right? But we have been doing that and doing selective breeding for traits for a long time. We and
manually
nature,
in a way.
we've just been really shitty at it, right?
The old-fashioned way.
Yeah, it's old-fashioned way, roll of the dice, right? And so it does not bother me when people come out and say that our dire wolves are genetically modified wolves, because that is a factual statement. We said that in our press release. We said that in our paper. We say that on our website, right? We're not secretly saying, oh, we have 400 million edits in this thing and no one will ever know it.
Right.
So we've been very clear about what we did. And the issue really is that, even if you go talk to, there's a DNA concept, there's a morphological concept, there's so many different concepts. And if you look at the phylogenetic tree of life, of all life, 99% of the classification of species and where they fall in the tree of life is morphological. 99%. We have not done the DNA sequencing on 99.9% of what's alive, let alone everything that's been extinct. And we can't on some of those because some of them are just fossil and there's no DNA. Right. But if you look at even just what's there, we have not sequenced less than 0.1% of the Earth. So to hold this weird, it's a little, it is a semantic argument.
Yes. Well, and we get a lot of is it 100% direwolf? And it's just, that's you can't even start with that question because that assumes that all direwolves are 100% the same. And to Ben's point, we have 60,000 years of divergence just between our two samples, but the species persisted for hundreds of thousands of years, was from southern Canada all the way down into northern South America. So if you were a direwolf in Venezuela 25,000 years ago, the good chance that you were not identical. You're probably very different than a dire wolf 150,000 years ago in Idaho.
Here's the other thing that is not your guys' fault at all, and I have to call out everyone in my industry or in industries close to it, because it is unfortunately how things work. When Time magazine comes out with a fucking incredible cover, I might add, it was amazing, right? Yeah. They're on an even tighter restriction than we are. Like when I write a title about this, let's start there. You guys are going to be called like the direwolf team or whatever, right? So that's going to be the back characters. I have 100 characters on YouTube, and really what I want to do is get the actual base of the title down to 60.
Yeah.
Right? So I got, what do we got, Alessi? Maybe 8 to 10 words to work with, something like that? Yeah. Which means I can't write out a title saying this De-Extinction company has genetically engineered a dire wolf or something close to it with 14 gene mutations, so it's not necessarily exactly the dire wolf.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Exactly. I have to write, they made fucking dire wolves.
Yeah.
And when you look at Time magazine, they have to go de-extinct or extinct no more.
Yeah.
Right? And so then the average person, me included, we quickly see that, oh, they brought the dire wolf back.
Yeah.
And we don't get the context of you sitting down and saying, here's exactly what this means. Here's what this translates to. Here's why this isn't necessarily confirmed as like a literal dire wolf, but why it's actually something that can be painted to that phyla or whatever.
And we're talking about some really complex technical things that require a lot of nuance. And so I totally understand knee-jerk reactions or some sort of, superficial emotional reaction when somebody goes, that's incorrect. Totally get it.
Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you.
I think as a scientific community, as a conservation community, we could do a better job of communicating to the public in a way that's more understandable. But there is a real desire for most scientists, and we talk to Beth, our colleague, about this all the time. Is like, sometimes it's okay to be a little more general because we need to bring more audience to the table.
And the thing is so a couple additional points on this is, once again, the media, some of the headlines were misleading, right? Believe it or not.
Sitting at home like, fuck.
Yeah, and so, but what's crazy is like they're like, but scientists disagree. It's like we have 95 scientific advisors from the top universities in the top
say it
of
like
their
it's
field.
Everything.
Yeah. And I was like, we also, but that's also to discredit the 172 people we have at Colossal, with 140 of them being scientists that left academia. So we have 95 scientific advisors outside of the 140 people. So just to be clear, some of the scientific community disagrees, right? And those are the people that people want, because people want clickbait, right? Like that's what they want. Now, to Time's defense, Time, and even though New Yorker fucked us and broke the embargo and made my life very painful for a couple of days.
I don't know about this.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Oh, we'll talk about it. Yeah.
Okay.
This is. I'll go 4 fucking hours on this thing. Okay. So
allowed to, Emily?
She's
saying yes.
But to their credit and to Time's credit, they spent 100 hours with us. They came to the lab. They saw the dire wolves. They spent time with the scientists. They understand. And the results, we didn't say, hey, go make a salacious headline or go say they're dire wolves. That was the result, that was the conclusion that they came to after talking to experts that are affiliated with Colossal, not affiliated with Colossal, after going insanely deep on it and spending 100 hours. Right. Their conclusion is, based on looking at the fact there's 31 ways to classify it, there's no species on the planet that falls into every 31 categories. Very few even fall into 3. So less than 10% of categorization works, right? It's because that is a general view, right? You talk to Kenneth Lacavaro, the #1 paleontologist in the world, who discovered the largest dinosaur in the world, Dreadnoughtus, which is fucking incredible.
What kind of dinosaur?
Dreadnoughtus.
The largest dinosaur ever discovered.
If you ever want, he's in New Jersey.
Let's get him in here. Let's go.
He's just awesome.
I want a dinosaur podcast.
I'm
into this.
He's your guy.
He's your guy. He's incredible. But I mean, he'll even argue semantics, and then he's like, well, technically, polar bears should be the same species. I mean, so then he'll go down this whole thing as brown bear. So he'll even debate this even internally, right? And but what I'll tell you is, when you spend the time with it and you understand all of it, you can come to a conclusion of, wow, this is a scientific, incredible feat for humanity that nothing's ever happened like this before. This is like the moon landing of genetics. And you can come to that it's a dire wolf, or it's the closest thing. Like, we have our website pulled up, but if you go to I don't know if I could do this. If you scroll up and go to our main menu, and we have to build a new website because there's so much shit on here. If you click De-Extinction, if you go scroll up one more time, sorry, top left, yeah. If you click De-Extinction, so the first button on our website is De-Extinction, which nobody clicks on, which is crazy. If you scroll down,
Well, it's a little hidden now.
yeah, it's hidden. It's only the first one.
We'll work with you.
So if you scroll down, just scroll down a little bit for it, right? Scroll down because it's about conservation. If you stop right there, right? So what's funny is since the direwolf launch, Wikipedia has been edited on the extinction page like 1,000 times.
God
But
damn
it
it,
used,
CIA.
yeah, but it used. We love the CIA.
To be clear, that was Julian. That was not
sitting there
Colossal.
yesterday, so maybe we got to check the wires around here.
Yeah. So, but before Colossal launched the direwolf, the Wikipedia definition was the process of generating an organism that resembles or is an extinct species. You cannot. We think that, and if you scroll down a little, if you just stop. So we think that was flawed. Now, because of the direwolves, that page has been completely rewritten to drive a certain agenda, which is interesting and weird in itself. But what's crazy is we think that engineering a species to look like another species isn't enough. We could do that without ever using ancient DNA. We just go trait engineering.
Yes.
The second thing is it's not possible to clone an extinct species, as Beth wrote in her book, and we've said from day one, right? So if you scroll down a little bit further, we actually talk about just a little bit further, right there, was that we think that's perfect. We think about rebuilding extinct species for today, and so we have this concept that we put out years ago, and so this is on our website. This isn't like some like hidden board deck that's like not available to the public. It's functional de-extinction, right? The process of generating an organism that both resembles and is genetically similar to an extinct species by resurrecting its lost lineage of core genes, because we identified the core genes that made a direwolf. But there's a lot of stuff in there, even between the 60,000 years of genetic divergence between the two direwolves that we had, that aren't core genes, that weren't conserved over time. So we identified the ones that were conserved over time, and then we also want to engineer natural resilience and enhance adaptability so they can thrive in today. So if you scroll down just a little bit further, and we pause here. So going back to EEHV, there will be, if I could clone
the elephant disease.
The elephant disease. If I clone a mammoth, which is not possible. If I clone a mammoth 100%, which is not possible, and we're not doing it because it's not fucking possible, and we've never said it's possible. But if we cloned a mammoth 100%, couple things. It's not going to have the same gut biome, because it's not going to be birthed by a mammoth who ate the exact same things, number one. So we know that the gut biome affects us. It changes how our behavior, it changes a lot of things about it. Here's the other thing. We know definitively that that mammoths were susceptible to EEHV. That means that, so if we engineer a cure for EHV, and I do not put that in here, that means if I put those edits into our mammoths and then make them confer resistance to EEHV, and I was 100% a mammoth. I got gut biome right. I used a time machine to get the right mom. I nailed everything. But I'm like, you know what? We should make the change so that 20% of mammoths don't die. Then everyone in the world could be like, oh, then at that point, it's your mammoths are now no longer mammoths, right? So these are semantic arguments. But I think of it from an ethical responsibility perspective. If we have the ability to rebuild extinct species, which we are at our core, we're a genetic engineering company.
Yes.
We're not a genetic cloning company or a extinct cloning company. We really want to think about engineering these things. And going back to the coding example, if we can make less edits and we can get the core phenotypes, if you look at our direwolves, if we want to pull up any pictures of our direwolves, they are...
Yeah, who's your photographer, by the way? There's some good fucking
There's some
pictures.
good ones.
Yeah, there's some good ones. And so he's here in New York, Andrew Zuckerman. He's awesome.
He's good.
Yeah.
Shout out Andrew.
So
please continue.
But I think Ben's point is really good. And as sort of the token animal guy, we could try to edit.
Token.
Right?
Well, it's chief animal officer.
Yeah, chief animal officer.
Which is a
man.
great fucking
It's the best
title.
job title ever, right? But one of my primary mandates at Colossal is to ensure the safety and welfare of the animals in our care. Right. And part of that doesn't just mean once the animal's born, it's my responsibility. It also means that as we're designing strategies to return species from extinction, we need to have welfare as one of our paramount concerns. To Ben's point, we focused on core edits. We could have taken it further. We could take it further today. We could go to 100,000 edits. We could go to 4 million edits. But every time we do that, we're increasing the risk of the outcome being less than optimal for that animal. And we have to ensure the health and welfare of every animal. So we'll take a stepwise approach. And what gets missed often is that 9 years ago, an international independent group of people that run the IUCN, That's the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and the Species Survival
They're like
Commission.
the UN of species.
Yeah.
Okay.
They wrote a white paper on proxy species rewilding, which is essentially what de-extinction is today. And what we did is there was something like 36 points that go through there. If you are going to pursue this endeavor, these are the considerations that you must make. And we went point by point through that thing, and we developed strategies that aligned with exactly that. And one of those is, at first, you need to take a cautionary approach that ensures the health and safety of your animals. Nailed it. You see those dire wolves? I mean, it's
Pretty fucking
yeah.
cute.
Adorable, healthy.
They look happy.
Amazing. Extremely happy.
Are they fucking eating people yet, or?
Just people we don't like.
Okay.
Yeah. But and now yeah. And we'll actually, we decided that we're going to write up a little draft and we're going to share it with the world so they can kind of see where we align with this guideline, because we took a lot of time and consideration to go into that. And now people sort of dismiss it. You haven't listened to any international experts. Bullshit. We took your playbook. We just did it. Right? Like,
Can we scroll down and see the bigger wolves? Because if you keep scrolling, here's a whole click thing. You can click.
also, what's amazing is I now have the most famous hands in the world.
Yeah, your hands.
Oh, those are all your hands every time?
Yeah.
Yeah,
funny as shit.
And so we have healthy animals with genes that have not been expressed in 12,000 years. But I want to give one. So this goes back to rebuilding. I want to give an example because no one actually talks about this. It's in the fucking press release, but no one talks about this. So with the edits that we made, there were 15 of them that were specific ancient DNA variants from the direwolf, right? But we chose 5 that weren't. No one's talked about this, which blows my mind. So I mentioned earlier that we now know definitively that direwolves were white. I can't say that, this is me being around too many scientists. I can't say all direwolves were white, but 60,000 years of genetic divergence, both those were white. I'm going to say statistically more than likely they were white.
And
right?
a significant geographical distance as well. We're talking Idaho and Ohio.
Yeah, and they're during the Pleistocene, so it kind of makes sense that they're white. But one thing that's interesting is we know that the specific variant of the gene that the direwolves have that made it white has been studied in canids. So we also, once again, people think that this is just colossal and they discredit the fact that we have science. The number one person in the world in canid genetics and canid evolution is a woman named Eleanor Carlson. She is at the Broad Institute. The Broad is most famously known for the one that fought Jennifer Doudna and Berkeley on the whole CRISPR wars. Where was it invented at the Broad? Was there? So the Broad's it's about as high of an echelon as you can get. And she is as high as an echelon as you can get when it comes to canid evolution and genetics, right? And so we worked with her, right? We didn't just do all this as even just the colossal people, right? We're not drinking our own Kool-Aid here. And we actually identified that the gene specific for that made direwolves white has been known, and this is evolution selective in natural selection, has been observed in wolves and in dogs to sometimes cause blindness or deafness. So from a purity perspective, some people will be like, we should put the fucking gene in, right? From an animal welfare perspective, that's stupid. So we actually did trait engineering on the white coat color. So we know definitively that this gene made direwolves white. We know it's 100, or we at least know that R2, just to be fair to scientists, is that we know that at least R2 samples were white, and we think that probably means that most were white. We then said, if we put this exact gene in, it's not 100%, but there's a non-zero probability that we could cause some negative effect on the animal welfare. So what we did was, just like in the woolly mouse, we identified a gene that made it the same color, right? So all of the coat color, all the coat thickness, if you scroll back if you go back 2 pictures, yeah, all of that's all their genes, right? That make it this crazy Arctic thing. They have this level, they have this mane up there. We didn't know that right from the fossil. Right? We didn't. Yeah. So that's all direwolf specific stuff that we've never seen before. But what I'll tell you is that white, we knew that the gene from the direwolves made it white, but we know that it comes with some risk. So we didn't put it in. We chose a different gene. This is where synthetic biology comes in. We chose synthetic biology to be able to engineer life or doing full DNA synthesis where you're engineering little blocks and putting it in. So we did that, and we put in a gene that would make it the same color that we know direwolves were without any risk to the animal. Now, from a purist perspective, people would argue that, right? They'd be like, that you made it less direwolf. No, you didn't. Like if you go to the morphological species concept, which is still what 99% of the entire fossil record is based on animal classification, is what we classify our direwolves on. But some people would say, well, then you made it less direwolf. It's like, no, it still has the morphological thing, and we did it without having any risk. It's the same argument with EEHV. If we know EEHV, if we can't improve the species, why not do it?
Why do it? Yeah, and I mean, you know what the core question is here, and I haven't asked it all day, but do you ever, and this goes to both of you actually, because this would be anyone on the team. But
it sounds hard. You should start.
Obviously, as a founder, do you ever sit up at night and wonder if you're playing God here?
I think we play, I mean, going back to your mentor, I think we play God. I mean, you saw the force cut down. We play God every single day, right? Like we play God, like I take God when I take Repatha on some level in my body, right? I take God, you play God when you add more creatine to your body, right? We play God when we burn down the forest that you've seen with your own eyes, right? When we overfish, when you overfish the ocean. We as humans are playing God every single day. We just are, right? We that is where humanity is. We are eradicating species. Like the thylacine, the Australian government put a bounty on their head to kill them. They didn't just naturally fall off the planet, right? And so, we choose to do that. So we think of this as a way that we can. If you look at technology as currently humans like apex innovation, well, why don't we start using that technology to do really great things that could help the world and inspire the next generation?
And here's real fast, Matt. I just want to make sure we hit this. Here's what I would view as the difference between what you're saying is the example of playing God and what I'm getting at. Everything you're referring to are things that we do on accordance of our own free will already created here on Earth.
Correct.
What you're doing is getting to the beginning of the foundation of the actual creation. So it is you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it's a little
bit
different to me, and I'm not saying it's bad.
Yeah.
I'm saying like it's heavy as fuck.
Heavy as fuck, and you better have people that feel that weight and feel that responsibility. And I think that was when, going back to that first meeting with Ben and some of the conversations I had with people in my personal life afterwards, when I said, am I going to take this hard right turn out of my career into this psychopath new company, right? I said,
a study recently came out that like 40% of CEOs are psychopaths. Yeah, I saw that on Instagram.
In my experience, it's 100%.
And I was like, I have to flip through that faster. I have to flip through that faster.
But you have two options there, right? Like Ben said it earlier, the cat was out of the bag on this thing. Somebody had to do it, and somebody challenged me in my life, and they said, you have two options. You can sit on the sideline and cast stones and be pissed when they do it a way that you don't agree with, or you can jump on that ship and help steer it and help take the helm. And that's where I feel more responsibility. Your kind of point about how heavy this is spot on, but I'd rather be at the table helping influence that thing. And I think that's where some of our skeptics that don't really use critical thinking, they just cast stones, they're missing out.
This is a great point too, because like anyone who we always see throughout human history, regardless of what it is, people are always afraid of the new technology. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The reality is though, based on the law of numbers of population and innovation and people who are going to try stuff, someone's going to do it.
Yeah.
So it's not to like rectify every single thing that happens, but it's like, if you can't prevent it, and we know as human beings, we can't prevent innovation, it just happens. It's better if you know in your heart your intentions are good. It's better for you to actually, as you say, have a seat at the table and try to steer that. And it is cool, again, like, Ben, it's one thing for you to be a business guy and come at it from that level and whatever, but then you have on your team, I mean, your co-founder is a scientist, right? You have on your team guys like Matt who are coming at it from the conservation and ecological realm. Like that, what you're striking me today is being someone who understands the important balance right there, which is what I do want to hear. Now, we'll see that in practice as this goes about, but that's
actions
cool.
speak louder than words, right? We can say whatever the fuck we want, but you have to like see it, right? And I think the fact that we go towards our critics, that we are honest with everything that, we put out there. Like, I think those things speak louder than, just quote unquote, trust us.
Right.
And I think one of the things that I feel like one of my superpowers is especially in today's world, I'm not afraid to say what I don't know. I don't know all of those things. I don't know all the ripple effects to the ecosystem. I don't know the ripple effects to conservation. I don't know those things. So what my job isn't to know those things. My job is to find and identify the smartest women and men in the world in these topics and bring them together.
Have you run into any problems? I shouldn't even say problems so far, but almost like arguments in your head where you have the capability
This
to
is a
do
dangerous
something
rabbit hole.
where it's more high level, I think, but I'll let you decide. Where like you have the capability to do something and you want to do it, and then you're talking to so many different heads, whether it be from conservation or science or whatever, and it's almost like, you know, the motions being stopped because there's too much clutter, and you're like, do I push through, and like, is it a risk if I push through because this is taking too long, or do I pull back and then we don't actually innovate here? Do you run into that?
I think for me, I really do trust our C-suite, right? It's like I feel like we've brought the best people together. And so I actually feel like I don't have that burden. Like there's not been a decision, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not been a decision where like, you know, our chief science officer, our chief animal officer, you know, our VP of data and all these people have said, we absolutely should not do this. And I'm like, we should do it. Let's just go. So
yeah, we haven't gotten that. I think that's been really good. And think for me, coming from this conservation background, and I know how, you know, sort of typically reserved and conservative the conservation community is, I always come out as a little I undersell it a bit because, you know, some audiences don't like the big, bold, audacious brand that's been built. I get it. So I'm always trying to temper that for them. And then often I actually get the inverse where I'm like, well, we could maybe think about this thing. And they go, we should do this. And suddenly the excitement comes out and then it feels better that there is a community that also supports that. Because that external validation is extremely important because we live in this insane bubble right now at Colossal, and we're doing amazing things and we're getting a lot of attention. So sometimes you can get a little echo chambery, but that's where the 95 scientific advisors, the 25 conservation advisors we have on our board, you know, all of our academic partners, all the people in my life, all the people that we get to talk to doing this, that get to ask questions, and they can validate concerns, they can validate ideas, and sometimes they'll shit on things and you go, yeah, you're right, that was stupid.
And also your history, though, of going to the outside of people who end up coming onto the team and whatever. And when we were on the break real fast, you were reading what we're going to read in a second about Paul, and you're like, we'd love to talk to him. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. So let's actually pull that up now. Let's read that because it's going to lead into a question I have about the evolutionary aspect of this and what the capabilities are there. Do we still have that, Alessi? How many screens did we pull up?
Too many.
All right, there we go. All right, perfect. So this was a post he put up with a meme of Brad Pitt from Fury talking about the news on dire wolves. And Paul's also like a very funny guy and a great writer too. So he's got good sarcasm in here, I think. But he said, everyone is being fooled. It's the ship of Theseus with no water. These are genetically modified gray wolves, not dire wolves. I listened to the podcast. He was referring to the one you did with Joe Rogan. I've spoken to the experts. Everyone feels the same. Amazing science project, cool stuff, but this is not conservation. There's a lot of amazing work being done to save species and ecosystems all over the world. So many heroes saving species. The dire wolf thing is just sci-fi clickbait, and it's robbing too much money that could be used to actually conserve the species we have here, and we've addressed some of this today, already in more effective and impactful ways. These people talk of productionizing species. They are cloning dogs for rich people who can't let go of their pets. And he did talk to me about that one. That was kind of funny. And in doing so, exposing a terrifying gap in basic logic. They don't get it. You can't clone grandma and expect the meatballs to taste the same. It's a copy of grandma, not the woman you love.
I agree. I totally agree.
Same goes for animals. This whole thing is exposing people's enormous amnesia for reality. Salmon have been hammering themselves up streams and against rocks for millions of years to become salmon. Only the strong survive the journey. They are inextricably tied to and the product of their environment and their history and context. Just as each species is tied to its ecological context. If you take a poison dart frog out of the jungle, it ceases to be poisonous. And he was explaining to me that's because they eat certain they eat certain insects that allow that bile or whatever to be created. And an orphaned tiger can never be wild without a mother tiger to teach it how to hunt. Animals have complex cultures. There's a sacred cycle and a natural order. We must protect our species, respect the wisdom of the wild. So my question's going to be like,
I think it's really well written.
Yeah, actually, let's start. Like, what do you think of?
I think, I mean,
you're hearing?
clearly, Paul, I've listened to Paul on your podcast. I've read Paul's books, right? Like brilliant guy.
Yeah.
Amazing writer. I wish I could
Amazing
express
writer.
myself that way.
Yes.
I think there's one severe flaw in the argument that he's presented here, and that is assuming that de-extinction is a replacement for conservation.
Which it just isn't.
It's
And
just
by
not.
the way, we are the de-extinction company that is saying that. We don't need the conservation community to say that. We say that.
Yeah, we believe that de-extinction is a part of conservation. It's one of the tools in the toolkit. It is an enhancing, accelerating factor for conventional conservation. As I said earlier, de-extinction doesn't work without habitats, so we have to start with habitat preservation, habitat restoration. All his points on sort of animals and it being in situ versus ex situ, totally valid. But those same arguments could be made for things like the red wolf captive breeding program. Well, yeah, we had to. This was a last resort. This was not our first choice. Nobody said, it'd be really cool. Let's just pull the wolves off the landscape so we can do whatever we want to the land. And we'll just keep them in a zoo. People make the same argument about biobanking, this idea of creating frozen tissues, that there's a moral hazard that if we can sort of put something on ice and ensure it won't ever go extinct, then why should people care about extinction?
Right.
Well, the real issue here is not enough people care about extinction already. I think Colossal is doing a great job of bringing more eyeballs to
The
this
awareness.
problem.
The awareness is
doesn't-
definitely a great argument.
It doesn't. Extinction doesn't affect people like in your mural there, right? Most people in there don't think about extinction every day. It doesn't affect people on a daily basis, so therefore they don't think about it every day, right? And I don't come from the community, so I am not as familiar with Paul as Matt is, or as you are. But this also is assuming a zero-sum game, right? So I like to say that there's one less shitty app that exists because we raise money from technology investors. We didn't go out and take money from the foundations that are giving money to conservation. This
wasn't a WWF funded project.
Yeah. So we're not taking money away from habitat restoration. We're bringing money from technology people that invest in AI companies and technology companies. We are having them invest in this business. That is 99% of our investors are from technology investors, the long-term and technology investors that invest in things like SpaceX and OpenAI and those types of technologies, right? And so now they're investing in a company, and we've got them and our board to agree that all the technologies that we have that we make an application to conservation, we give to the world for free. So this is new money coming into conservation. We're almost, I think of us as like a research and development lab for conservation, right? Yeah. And to your point, you said this earlier, like new technologies are scary, right? And so what I assume Paul, and I don't want to speak for Paul, but what I assume Paul and other people will say to this is they're going to say, yeah, but it's not 100% direwolf, so we can't call it a direwolf, and he'll go down one speciation argument, which he's not wrong on, based on that one definition, but there's also 30 other definitions.
Right.
The second thing is, I think that based on what he said, he's worried about is this is going to take money away, which it's not. That implies that there's a finite supply of money. This is shifting money from technology development into conservation. And then I think the third thing,
you guys have made some great arguments on that today.
But once again, in Paul's defense, he just read some. I have no fucking idea what article he read. He read some clickbaity article about it.
Well, he did talk to 11 evolutionary biologists,
which is great. Yeah. But he should also talk to. We have 48 conservation.
Yeah, he's friends with some guys who are involved with your project.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that's great. But when we love to talk to him, right? Because once again, you can learn a lot more. Paul is an informed critic, right?
Yes.
So you can have critics,
very informed,
that are dumb, and then you can have informed critics. We love informed critics. Even if they don't like everything we're doing, you can learn a lot from them. Right?
And what's great is when you have those conversations with people like Paul and other informed critics, what you end up walking away with is you go, 95% of the time, we're completely aligned. We're arguing about 5% of a topic here.
But sometimes that 5% we're totally wrong on, which we're cool with. We're not going to do everything right. We're just like that's not going to happen. And so in that, we have to have these conversations and learn better. But the other thing that Paul's pointing out, which I think is very valid, is that there seems to be a concern that this is a replacement and that it's going to get people not focused on conserving land and conserving ecosystems. And he's spot on. We have to do that. But the thing that I think that Paul has missed in this, and I'm not speaking negatively, is that when we started the business, the external peer-reviewed scientists, not Colossal has never said this outside of reference to other things, it was forecasted that we were going to lose 15%, 1.5. It's now forecasted that we're going to lose 50. So we can conserve all the land we want. but I don't think it's going to trend that line. So we have to do that, and we have to biobank as an insurance plan. It's so fucking expensive to bring back species. It's not feasible to bring back every species. Anyone that thinks that is insane.
And like Paul says, it's not grandma.
It's not
We can
grandma.
create a functional replacement.
Yeah, the clone and the dog thing, that I think that was like sticking in them, just because it's like it's not the same.
But
You know what I mean?
we're not a dog cloning company.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah, that's more symbolic, like in a way, but that's that's the kind of
get
thing
it.
that maybe
Yeah.
for someone like that, he's like, all right, come on, guys.
Yeah,
you know
I totally
what I mean?
get that. But that, one point Paul makes in here is that, this money, Ben already highlighted, this money isn't being taken away from conservation.
Yes.
It's additive to conservation. We get a lot of people that come to us and say, you've raised $435 million for the business, $50 million for the foundation, so $485 million. What you should be doing this with $500 million.
Right.
And my argument is, yeah, you should. You should go raise $500 million and do that thing that you think is the right answer. And I will support you and I'll help you raise the money. But this is how we believe we can be impactful to the world.
This is your line of expertise.
This is where we go.
I always say this is such an existential problem that we need we need a entire tapestry to solve this problem.
Yeah.
This is an existential threat. Loss of biodiversity and ecosystem collapse is an existential threat that will affect how we as humans can and live on this planet. We're one thread. And I like to say to the critics, if you hate what we're doing, that's great. But like some of our biggest critics, they're like, oh, well, you're not doing stuff enough for elephant conservation. It's all good. I was like, well, how much money have you spent on elephant conservation? What are your checks? And we can do it a percentage of income. I'll tell you what I've spent. You tell me what you've spent. We'll do a percentage of income. And because I don't want to be not fair to different socioeconomic statuses. But then separate. So we can do it based solely on a percentage basis that is more than fair. And then I'll say, great. If you don't have any money, which is fine, how much time have you devoted to it?
Yes.
And often the answer is zero. And I'm not being a dick about it. I'm just saying the reality is that like
It's easy to throw stones from glass houses.
It really is. And by the way, we're not going to do everything right, as I just said. But this is our thread. We need 1,000. We need 1,000,000 threads that are doing what we're doing things that are crazier than we're doing. They're doing things more conservative that we're doing. We need an entire tapestry of this. We are not the solution. We are one small thread. But if you don't like what we're doing, get off the fucking couch and go do something else. Yeah.
And I think we sort of talk about conservation in this funny way, is that we say, well, this is how much I spent on conservation, right? Oh, it's
a weird business model of all time.
Yeah, we measure success by inputs. Well, I think what Colossal's doing and what I'd love to see everybody do is we want to measure by outcomes. What was the outcome of your work? How did you impact it? How many species were saved? And
how many more elephants are there? Right? I always, sometimes this creeps people out. I said this on Joe Rogan. I got a lot of weird feedback about it. It was like we have not solved this yet, but we do have a 17-person team working on artificial wombs. Eventually,
Artificial wounds.
This will get Paul with the productionizing idea, but it's talking about scaling.
It's honest. I'm not saying everyone's going to do it, but it's like if you could grow species fully ex-utero in a system so you have no animal welfare issues, and you can engineer and genetic diversity like we could, and you could make 50 founder lines of northern white rhinos, and then work with people conserving land like Paul, and work with Save the Rhinos and biorescue and all of these teams to put them back in the wild, right? Yes, you are going to have, to Paul's point, you're going to have Gen 1 problems around elephant or rhino socialization, right? And so one of the things that we also don't get credit for is like we work with elephant havens in Botswana who saves orphaned elephants and works to synthetically engineer herds and figure out the social dynamics to put orphaned elephants back into herds, right?
Right.
Including baby elephants that don't have a mom, right? And so we are funding that research now because it helps elephants today, but that will also, lessons learned from that will teach us how we do. So we're not, once again, we're not just in a lab. A lot of people think, oh, it's just crazy people in a lab, right? But like we're working with the top people in the field in elephant conservation. We have a project going on in Kenya that's all focused on herd dynamics, migratory patterns, and using drones to identify specific social cues on a specific elephant so we can understand, are they stressed or whatnot. All of that helps elephant conservation today.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.